Hey, Warrior Saints, Father Chris here, and welcome to the Way of the Warrior Saint, where we are attacking the COVID virus quarantine with our COVID survival series. Today, we're going to talk about something totally fun, habits. You ever notice that we tend to do a lot of things without thinking about it? I mean, I don't know about you, but when I brush my teeth, I don't think about it, I don't plan it, there's no agenda item on my calendar. It happens. And during the day, I don't look back and say, did I brush my teeth? I don't even ask that question because I know that it got done. Why is that? Why are those things that we do, why are there those things that we do that we don't even think about and we just do them? It's because of something called habit. A habit is an action that we repeatedly do, and most of the time it happens without thinking, it happens without memory, it just happens. Habits help us get through the day. They make the mundane things just happen so we can focus on the big things, the things that matter. And so how do we take control of our habits? Maybe eliminating some of those things that we call bad habits so that we can establish good habits. Those are the questions we want to work on today in the Way of the Warrior Saint. Come on. Science has told us that about 70% of what we do daily is done by habit. That means that most of the things that we do during the day, we don't even think about. It's just happening. Whether it's driving the car, brushing the teeth, drinking water, whatever it may be, habits are things that just happen. And they absorb very little of our mental programming space, if I can say it like that, or computing space, which is a good thing. Because there's only so much space in this one for sure, but there's only so much space in there that we have to use to get all the rest of the stuff done. If we were focusing with this mental computational ability on everything, we'd get really tired really fast. So the human being has evolved wonderfully to say, I'm going to develop a habit so that I don't have to pay attention to most of it, so that I can pay attention to the things that I want to, the things that are important. It's a beautiful thing. With that, we have some of this computational space that's taken up with bad habits, which we're going to talk about in just a moment.
That doesn't compute.
But to understand how habits work in our brain, how it works biologically or chemically, physically inside the human being, we have to understand 3 steps. Trigger, routine, reward. Some people say cue, routine, reward. Whatever it may be, there is a 3-step process that we call the habit loop. And what that means is there is something that cues a behavior, something that we see, something that we hear, a time of the day, a smell, a sound, whatever may be, that triggers or cues a response. That response is what we do after hearing, seeing, feeling, sensing that trigger. So it's the action that takes place. The reward is the reason why we would do that. The reward is the joy that comes from doing whatever the routine is. So for example, I'm carrying my coffee. All right, I have a cue every single morning, and it's called being a grumpy jerk. Like I wake up as a grump. That's my cue. I know. I don't feel good. I'm tired. I'm groggy. And I know that I need to do something to take care of that. The routine is I drive to the Dunkin'. I go to Dunkin' and I order me some coffee, and I order it the way I like it.
We made the donut.
The reward is the lovely flavor and the jolt of caffeine, which makes me a different person, a bearable person, a nice person, or at least a nicer person. And so this has become for me habit. I cannot and will not begin any single day of my life without this habit. The cue is I wake up grumpy. The routine is the action of going and getting coffee or making it at home. And the reward is the warm flavor and the jolt of caffeine. That is a habit. Now, what's interesting about building a habit is that it actually happens within the brain, chemically, biologically. There is a synaptic pathway. I'm going to spare you all the boring science, but basically the way that the brain functions is that cell communicates with cell, with cell, with cell, with cell, with cell on electrical current, just going. It's a path that it follows.
Yeah, man, I'm good for tomorrow. Yo, I'll hit you back.
Now we're cooking.
Do that routine enough times, and that path will be permanently cemented in your brain. And it is called a synaptic pathways. And what that means is this, that every time I wake up in a grump, I don't have to think, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? How am I going to solve? I just know somewhere deep inside, go get coffee. It just happens. Same thing happens when you brush your teeth. I mean, which of you writes a note on a sticky pad and sticks it on the mirror that says, brush yo teeth? You just know. Maybe you didn't initially, but your parents taught you and it's become a habit. That path is ingrained in your brain and it will be there until the day that you die. One thing that we know from the scientific study of habit is that once a habit path, a synaptic pathway is formed in the brain, it is there forever. And that is probably why you and I, especially I, can't crush bad habits very easily. Because it's like, well, I'm just going to stop. You can't. It's in the brain. It's the science. It's there. It's done. Cannot break a bad habit. You can only reprogram it. We'll talk about that in a moment.
Can't stop.
The book of Proverbs is perhaps one of my favorite, if not my favorite book in all of the Bible. The book of Proverbs is a beautiful text that's written to talk to us about how to find life through wisdom, and that wisdom itself is abiding by the commandments of God. So Proverbs is technically a book of wisdom, but it's ultimately showing us that true wisdom comes from listening and abiding by the commandments of God. In chapter 22, verse 6, it talks to us about, as parents, how we should raise our children. It's throughout the book, but in 22:6, it says the following, and you probably even know this verse. Train up a child in the way that he should go, and when he's old, he will not depart from it. Teach your children. Show them the right way. Show them that the right way is to abide by the commandments of God, and when he or she becomes an older person, it will be in them. They will not depart from it. They will not say, oh, I learned this, now I'm going to go behave like this. It will be in their very blood, in their core, in their DNA. It will become a habit. And what the author of Proverbs is saying to us is, look, teach them when they're young. Build those habits when they're young, and it will stick in them. It will be a part of their life forever and ever. He's talking about abiding by God's commandments, rightfully so. That's what the Proverbs is about.
God wills it.
But there's a lesson for us in this monologue from Proverbs. See, the proverbist realized, whether he knew our current science about habits or not, that if we do something enough over and over, it's going to stick. And so train your children to do over and over and over the things that matter. In this case, abiding by the commandments of God. So that when they become older, they will abide by the commandments of God. And he's teaching us, hey, you, subsequent generations, when you're raising your kids, teach them the right things. Train up a child in the way that he should go. And when he's old, he won't wander from that way. He won't depart from it. Teach them the right things. And what he's saying to us, and now in my terms, is that we have to train ourselves and our children in good habits. Building good habits so that we don't depart from them. Because as we know, scientifically today, in 2020, we know that the habit loop, that synaptic pathway, is there forever. So let's build good ones so that we might bear fruit, not having the bad habits that you and I all want to run from. Build the good ones, they're there forever, so that we might always walk in the commandments of God.
The Lord lift up his countenance upon thee.
And so that leads us, as it does every day on the way of the Warrior Saint, to our practical point. And today we're going to have 3 of them. The first one being write it down. The second one being habit stacking. And the third one being do the hardest thing first. Come on.
Now let's get started.
When you want to establish a new habit, knowing that that pathway is there, it's cemented, how do we conquer that? I think the first step is you've got to actually plan and devise a legitimate system for developing a new habit. If you're like me, you've said to yourself, especially on January 1st, I am no longer going to do this, or I am going to start doing that every single day. And you start out pretty strong for like 10 days, and then all of a sudden, boom, it's gone, and your New Year's resolution is vanished. Why is that? Is that because you're a loser? I don't think so. I mean, you may be a loser, but I don't think so. It's probably because you're fighting against a habit, right? And habits, as we know, are in a sense unbreakable. And so instead of being able to break the habit, we have to retrain the routine. Remember cue, routine, reward? We have to retrain the routine. And to do that is not something you can just guess on. It's not something you can just hope on. It's not something that will just fall in place magically if you say, oh God, change my habit. You have to deliberately plan it out. And you have to write all of it out that you want to do. And what that means is this, practical point number 1 comes full circle. Get your trusty Warrior Saints journal. If you don't have one, you better. get your journal, and write down, literally, I, your name,
I, your name,
am going to do X at this place, at this time, with these things. So you really have to be very clear and very deliberate. I promise you, if you hope, it ain't going to happen. If you do the work, you got a shot. Write it down. Draw the plan. It may seem grandiose and it may seem impossible, and maybe it is, but I will tell you this, it is certainly not possible if you don't write it down at all. So use that journal, draw the map, and start with one. Don't make it huge, but draw the map so that you know how you are going to retrain this habit loop.
Write that down.
And that leads to practical point number 2. What are the steps? Well, I don't know all of the steps. You have to design them, but I am going to give you one cheat, one hack on how to do that. And it's something called habit stacking. Habit stacking is a fabulous idea. If you've never read the book Atomic Habits by a gentleman named James Clear, I recommend that you stop this recording, go read that book, or at least order it on Amazon, and then come back and finish. Habit stacking is an idea that I learned from James Clear in his book Atomic Habits, which says, I've already got this habit formed. I'm now going to stack another one on top of it. So to go back to my earlier, this is a habit for me. Coffee every day is a habit. It is what it is.
You and me on a tandem bike, sipping on Dunkin' Ice coffee.
But now I want to take vitamins every day. How do I do that? I mean, I'm not going to remember it. But wait a minute. This is already built. This is a habit that's formed. What if I put my vitamins on top of my coffee machine? What if I put the new habit and stack it on top of the old existing habit? So that every day I do this, I see the trigger of my vitamins on top of it, and I know, oh, take your vitamins. And in no time, this new habit desire has become a reality. Do you see that? It's stacking one habit on top of another. It's a great hack, a great cheat. It really works. Like, just another quick example. Every time you go to the dentist, he tells you to floss. And you say, I do, and he knows you don't, because no, who flosses? But let's say you want to floss. You probably should. But if you don't, and you want to, how would you do it? Well, you know you brush your teeth every day. Why don't you put your dental floss right on top of the toothbrush, on top of the toothpaste? You can't get to the brush until you've acknowledged the floss. You may choose to ignore it, but at least you're trying to stack one habit on top of the other. Do you see it? So it's really simple. Write it down. Practical point number 1, write it down. Write down, draw the plan. Include in that plan the hack, which is the habit stack in practical point number 2 that you want to establish. And that leads lastly to practical point number 3. I don't care what anybody says, I'm right. Willpower is a muscle, and it gets tired over the day. It gets tired throughout the day through all the stuff we have to deal with, our willpower. And so by the end of the day, if you're like me, you ain't got none of it left. It's a renewable resource. You go to sleep, you wake up, you feel refreshed, new willpower. But in the interim, throughout the day, it gets hammered and pounded, and it's less and less. And so if you're like me, some of the things we want to do, the really important things, we often say, I'm going to wait until I get everything perfectly aligned and everything in order, and then I'm going to be focused and have the freedom of mind and of heart and of soul to attack the hard thing, the thing that matters the most, which is a great idea until you get to that point and you're like, oh, dude, I'm so tired. I don't have any willpower left, and I can't do it. And it gets bumped off to tomorrow or next week or never, right? So how can we, in establishing habits that we're writing down and that we're stacking on already existing habits, get the good stuff, the big stuff done? You get it done by making a habit to do the hardest thing first, by doing the most important thing first. In my world, in my estimation, the hardest thing and the most important thing are usually the same thing. Not always, but most of the time, they are the same thing. And so let's get it done first. Make it a habit, and this is already written in your journal and devised a plan with your stack, to do the hardest and most important thing first. How great do you feel when you've conquered that really big and important thing on your to-do list? I mean, if you're like me, you feel awesome because you know, I don't care no matter what else I didn't get done, I got the main thing done, the important thing done. And it's like, whew. Why don't you feel like that every day? Because if you're like me, every day, or at least most day, you take that one thing and you bump it down the road. But instead, what if you made a habit of getting that done first? So that the rest of the day, even if it's a total failure, is not a failure because you got the most important thing done. I mean, it's kind of cool, but it requires a design, a plan to make that happen. So for example, what's your most important thing? I don't know, let's say you want to pray every single day. Warrior Saints, come on, we're supposed to. Or to read the Bible every single day. And again, if you're like me, the days are long and beautiful, but tough. And at the end, you're like, I'm so tired, I can't do it. Okay, so you blew it. Why don't you do it first? Why don't you get your you-know-what out of bed and go right over your prayer corner? Read one page of the Bible, for God's sake. Just one page. I don't care. Pick any page. Let it fall open and read. Say your prayer. The Lord's Prayer. You can only say one prayer? Fine. Say the Lord's Prayer. Get it done. How much more glorious do I feel throughout the day when I say, I didn't do anything, but I prayed. I didn't do anything today, but I read Scripture. I feel better when that's done. It's awesome. Same with exercise. Get it done. Look, I did not exercise this morning when I'm writing this. Right now I feel juiced. I feel great because I'm teaching and I'm on fire and I'm having fun, but I'm going to go home and I'm going to exercise. I don't know. We're going to find out. But I'll let you know tomorrow. But the truth of it is, if it was already done, I would feel so rock star awesome because my physical health has already been, that part's already been taken care of. So the rambling needs to end here by saying this. Practical point number 3 is perhaps as equally as important as practical point number 1. Do the hardest thing first. Remember, the hardest thing is usually also the most important thing. Get it done. Draw it in your plan, stack it on top of another pre-existing habit, and get it done.
Get her done.
All right, Warrior Saints, great stuff today. Fun. I hope this was a good one for you. I really want to push you. Get those habits developed, but you got to think through them and you got to write them down. Connect them, stack them on top of something else, and then make sure you do the big one first. Great stuff. We will see you tomorrow, and until then, keep walking on the way of the Warrior Saint.